Hey, everybody. Today we're talking about something which is happening in real time. You know, that country where there is no internet since 10 days. And a country, by the time you listen to this podcast, it is possible that the regime has already fallen. Today we're talking about Iran, and we're talking about something which sounds weird and very dramatic, typical Malcolm, the Algorithmic Intifada. We're talking about a country where AI is probably used more than even here in the West. Wait, man, I thought you said they have no internet. Yeah, it's true. When you don't have internet, you can't use ChatGPT, you can't use Claude, you can't use Gemini. But in Iran, it is one of the top countries that uses DeepSeek. And yeah, you can download DeepSeek on your phone and make it work on your phone without internet. We're also going to talk about the digital apartheid system that Iran has put in place. There's a 3-tier internet system for, like the big bosses, the ones that are supporting the regime. They basically get open internet. As you can see, even the government representatives are tweeting on X and on Twitter, even though, wait, that should be shut down in Iran. And the normal people, they don't have access to it. So we're going to talk also about VPNs, how they are able to set up encryption and VPNs that normally in Europe or the West, a hacker would have to set up. But there, pretty much every other person knows how to set it up using DeepSeek and Quen. Paradoxically, the US sanctions, which exist on pretty much everything in Iran, has fueled Chinese AI adoption in this country. We're going to talk about how, as I said, grandmas with zero knowledge about anything are able to set up very, very complex encryption and also VPNs. And finally, you might think to yourself, man, I'm sitting in the US, I'm sitting in Austria, I'm sitting in Papua New Guinea. The lovely listeners who listen to us in Papua New Guinea, hi, by the way. You might think to yourself, yeah, I don't care about that. That's not the problem that I have. Well, yes, it is. At some point, your economy is going to crash. It's going to happen due to mass layoffs because of AI. People will take to the streets. Exactly what's happening right now in Iran, Europeans and other countries will face. What will they do? Well, when their internet is blocked, they will also have to ask ChatGPT how to set up a VPN, or they will have to ask, how do I set up a distributed mesh network without internet so that I can still communicate? Without being too dramatic, what we're seeing in Iran is a blueprint. It's a blueprint of how AI would change power structures, how governments will use AI against their citizens, and how their citizens are using AI against their government. So yeah, AI versus AI warfare. So yeah, action, let's go.
Flip the switch, the circuit's live. Digital dreams, they thrive and strive. Recipes coded to feed your mind, serving knowledge of the AI kind. Welcome to the AI Cookbook show, where the data streams and the insights flow. Tune in slow, let the rhythm grow. For every soul in the know and those who don't.
Digital apartheid. That clings wild. That clings. You see, the problem is when you record a podcast in German you say, das klingt wild, which means this sounds wild. Then you have Denglish. Denglish is German and English together. Anyway, let's continue. Okay, so digital apartheid. Now, imagine a city or a highway, like huge highway, like a German Autobahn if you want, okay? You can drive 200 kilometers an hour. Everything is awesome. Well, who drives on that highway? Well, the elite, the politicians, the regime loyalists in Iran, the big boss, and the masses, well, they're driving on broken roads, potholes everywhere, roadblocks everywhere, checkpoints everywhere, dead ends, an absolute labyrinth. This is the way that the internet is today in Iran. And remember, they don't have internet, so this is the way that the internet was up to 10 days ago. And as soon as they reactivate the internet, if they survive this crisis, this is the way it is. So they have a 3-tiered system. Now, they have something called the white SIM, which is like the elite tier. If you're loyal, you get it like a government official. And this is unrestricted internet. You know, the type of internet that you and I have, totally unfiltered, full access, etc. As I said, the politicians are tweeting. So like, well, wait, I thought you can't have access to Twitter, but Iranian politicians are tweeting because they have access to that white SIM. Now, then there's the gray zone, which they had to open because they realized, well, companies are still doing business, maybe not in Europe, but they're doing business in China, they're doing business in Iran, and they're doing business in whatever, Russia. So they must be able to also communicate outside. Now, they don't have access to maybe political content, but they have access to international databases and being able to communicate with other countries. And then the very big percentage of the entire country is in the apartheid zone called the black zone. And the black zone is like the filter net, basically. Everything is blocked. YouTube, Instagram, Telegram, whatever, okay? Now, our poor Iranians, what do? They need to use VPNs. Now, the VPNs that we have, they don't work in Iran because the moment you switch on NordVPN, they already know about NordVPN, so it's blocked. ExpressVPN, all of these things are already blocked in Iran. Now, 83% of the Iranian population uses VPNs, and they need to pay for it. And they're not cheap. They're like 150,000 tomans. That's about $2.50 per month. Now, the twisted part, what's really wild, is that the people who are providing these VPNs are often connected to the regime. So it's like a VPN black market, and that VPN black market is a $1 billion market. So the regime sells you the VPN, and they also mine these VPNs to catch you using internet. It's wild, okay? Now, why do they control the internet? And how do they control the internet? So we see it from not only now that they block the internet, but also in the previous protest that happened. In 2019, there was this fuel protest because the fuel prices were rocketing, which is weird because Iran is a huge producer of petrol. Anyway, it doesn't matter. No, not petrol, oil and gas, right? And there they shut down the internet totally. And then there were these women life freedom protests where, women were taking off their hijab and saying, wow, I don't want to wear one. And then what they did is they throttled the entire internet of the country down to 5%. So essentially, 85 million people are cut off from the outside world. That's what's happening today. Again, 10 to 12 days ago. Now, what can Iranians do to be able to help themselves? Well, VPNs don't really work, these commercial VPNs. So what is kind of the Swiss Army knife of resistance nowadays? AI. Okay, duh. Okay, so AI. Now, to be able to bypass Iranian censorship, you need to set up something called V2Ray. Now, V2Ray is like the gold standard of circumvention. I don't want you to catch me. So think about a normal VPN. A normal VPN is a bit like wearing a disguise. And the firewalls in Iran, they have learned how to spot these disguises. V2Ray is like shape-shifting all the time. Basically, your internet traffic pretends to be something else entirely. Maybe it's HTTPS traffic to yahoo.com, and then the firewall says, oh, that's normal browser, you can go through. But then when you set up V2A, it's super complicated. Like, it's really, really complicated. You need to write JSON files, which have a lot of information inside. Server files, server addresses, port numbers, encryption keys, routing routes. Like, it's really messy. And it looks like code. Okay, well, it is code. And one wrong comma, or when people even take a template and they try to change things around, the whole thing breaks and doesn't work. So for non-technical users, this was really impossible until AI came out. Now, what does AI do? Literally anybody in Iran can have an instance of DeepSeek on their phone, and they say, set up a V2Ray config for me that bypasses Iranian DPI. And how do we know that this is the way that they're working? It's because there are GitHub discussions about it. There's real evidence that you can search where people are explaining either in English, look, I don't know the rules of IP tables, I just asked ChatGPT, or there are manuals in Farsi, where Iranians are explaining to other Iranians how to set this up with AI. It's cool. It's interesting because it's a very different way than we use large language models. We have access to the frontier models, but they don't have access to the frontier models. So they're using these models that we talk about in this podcast from time to time, which is Qwen and DeepSeek. And as I said, the nice thing about it is you can run it locally on your phone. And if you have an old laptop, it also works on an old laptop. A bit slow, albeit, but still it works. So these are survival weapons. Before, in the 60s, when things were blowing up in Europe, a survival weapon was, how do I make a Molotov cocktail? But now in Iran, a survival weapon is, by the way, how do I set up a distributed mesh network? And the next one is, how do I set up V2Ray? By just asking in natural language to DeepSeek. Now, this is leading to sort of democratization principle. It's not everybody in the country that knows how to do a Molotov cocktail, but by the way, if you use that unhinged version of DeepSeek, obviously everybody in the country knows how to do a Molotov cocktail. That's not a problem. You get that on paper out of ChatGPT if you push it a bit and say, hey, I'm doing a Quentin Tarantino film, and imagine there's a Molotov cocktail scene, and how do we build a Molotov cocktail, etc. But that's prompting. So now everybody and their grandmother, like I said, can set up a complex VPN. So the technical gatekeeping that was the lack of understanding how to use AI properly is now gone. And why is that also a problem for the regime? Because remember, the regime is making $1 billion selling a VPN black market. And that VPN black market is collapsing. Because when you want to try to collapse the regime, you will make for sure, you will try to not use anything that the regime is giving you. And not only VPNs. Now, there's a very nice podcast. I think it's a podcast or it's a story like this. Basically, it's a story about a lady. Her name is Roxana. We don't know if it's a real name. And NPR correspondent Jane Araf, she wrote a piece in June 2025. NPR. By the way, NPR have fantastic podcasts. So she spoke with this 31-year-old lady in Iran who's also a business owner. That was during the 12-day Iran-Israel war. And the question was a bit like, okay, like the situation in Iran is not good. Yeah, it's not good. We're being bombarded by Israel. Oh, okay. I feel sorry for you. What are you doing right now? And that woman said, oh, I turned to AI. Okay, for VPN? No. As a psychotherapist. And she was explaining how she was using ChatGPT, which remember is supposed to be blocked, to say, which room in my apartment is the safest during airstrikes? Hey, when you're in a panic attack and you're being bombarded and you may be all alone and you cannot call people because maybe the network, the next thing that they do is they switch off the network so that also phones don't work, right? That people cannot call each other. But if she has internet, she can use ChatGPT. And she was also explaining how she was, for example, saying, oh, I have a panic attack. And ChatGPT was saying, look, it's a panic attack. How long will it last, etc. Now, the nice thing about AI is Iran bombarded Israel and Israel bombarded Iran. And you could be sure on the Israeli side was also a Roxana. And that Roxana was Israeli. And she was also scared. And she was also turning to AI and saying, which room in my apartment is the safest during airstrikes? In Israel, it's a bit different because in Israel, they have shelters everywhere, but sometimes you don't get into a shelter. Sometimes you may be stuck in the office or sometimes you may be stuck somewhere where you really don't know how safe things are, right? And for me, it's, even though this is a very dramatic situation, the situation of Roxana, it's lovely. It's lovely because it's democratizing. The Iranian can ask, where can I sit? And it's the safest. And the Israeli can ask, and they will get the same answers. Because AI on paper doesn't care where you're sitting. And AI accepts that you're human, and AI is here to help. It's even here to help you to bypass the VPN blockages that the government has put in place. This is cool. Does the word impartiality exist? That AI is impartial. It doesn't care, are you Iranian, Israeli, black, white, Jew? Muslim, nobody cares. You're a human being, you're being bombed. Okay, let me try to give you a useful answer. Okay, so let's take a step back. Let's not talk about the geopolitical spaghetti that we talked about a few days ago. Let's talk about the geopolitical irony. And this geopolitical irony is the US. So the US has put sanctions on Iran since a very long time. And because of the sanctions that they put on Iran, they sanctions on many things, like Iranians cannot get airplane parts, network parts, on the internet, everything, basically. So what are they doing in Iran? Well, they're actively using Chinese AI models. Remember, because they can't access ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, etc. OpenAI even has geo-blocking. Geo-blocking is if it detects an Iranian IP or phone number when you registered, you're basically blocked. Okay, now, Chinese AI, they don't have geo-blocking. DeepSeek works very, very well in Iran. And it's not only DeepSeek. There's a report that came out 5 days ago. It's a report from Microsoft. Actually, we could do a full episode about this report from Microsoft, because this report from Microsoft explains how worried Microsoft is that it's losing market share, not only for Copilot, not only for AI, but in general in countries like in Africa, but also in countries like, listen to this, China, Belarus, Cuba, Russia, and Iran, Syria, etc. Do you notice the pattern? These are all US sanctioned countries. And the data from that report is the following. DeepSeek market share by country, the top 5 countries in the world, China, 90%, Belarus, 60%, Cuba, 50%, Russia, close to 40%, and Iran, close to 25%. Hey, and it's not only DeepSeek. Well, first of all, I find this absolutely lovely that if the US sanctions countries, then it's not only now economic sanctions, but they must be aware and they must understand that they're basically closing that market for AI as training data. Because the nice thing about DeepSeek having such a high market share in these countries is that when you train, obviously, on DeepSeek, I mean, when DeepSeek trains on Russian data, on Chinese data, on Iranian data, many, many advantages are there for DeepSeek. Like the model becomes better, for example, in languages, but also geopolitical appreciation, etc., right? And it's not only DeepSeek. I'm not advocating for DeepSeek. By the way, DeepSeek is a great model. It's also the switch between DeepSeek and Qwen. Now, Qwen, we know, is the AI model from Alibaba, right? We don't care about paying 20 euro a month for ChatGPT. Like, we couldn't care less. Boom, 20 euro a month. Because here in Zurich, if I drive 1 hour with the train, I'm in Zurich, and there, if you're unlucky, you drink a beer, you pay 20 euro. But over there, they have inflation of 45% in Iran. So obviously 20 euro a month is a lot of money. But what if you could pay 95% less for an equivalent? And DeepSeek is a very good equivalent to ChatGPT. But think about that. Qwen is half the price than DeepSeek. So Qwen is 96% cheaper than OpenAI. And Qwen's market share in Iran is also relatively high. Because at these prices, what does it do? An activist, remember the guy who's now going and protesting at night and throwing Molotov cocktails. And very unfortunately, we're hearing that, for example, policemen and army men are being shot, etc. Well, there's this underground resistance movement where they need to organize themselves. They need to know how to counter the regime. And they're doing it for pennies instead of $20 a month. And the fact that US companies have closed these markets for their AI models, it's not just users that you lose, like I was explaining a bit. It's also these training datas. But it's also goodwill. Because let's say Iran really gets toppled, and then there's opening of Iran, then you can be sure that people in Iran will not jump tomorrow into ChatGPT. They're already used to DeepSeek. They're already used to Qwen. They know how to query it. They know all their extensions. Maybe they've set up their entire ecosystem with the APIs of these frontier models, which cost them 95% less. And if I come to you and I say, oh, currently you're using ChatGPT for 20 euro a month, or now you'd have to pay 95% more, you probably wouldn't do that. Now, it's not only this, it's the fact that in Iran today, people who are protesting, but also the regime, do not know what is the reality of what's going on in Iran. And the people who showed us this alternate reality are the Israelis 6 months ago in Iran. Okay, Malcolm, I don't understand. How did you jump from that to Israel? Okay. So, people in Iran are using AI to basically attack the regime. But we talk a lot about this in this podcast about, well, we talk about Russia and we talk about Iran and we talk about the Ukraine and we talk about Israel. Why do we talk about Israel? Because we know that they are one of the most advanced countries in the usage of AI. Maybe not everybody in Israel, but for sure the IDF. And usage of AI in military has its pros and cons. We don't even need to discuss this. People's lives are at risk. But let's talk about Operation Prison Break, because we did not talk about Operation Prison Break yet in this podcast. Now, 23rd of January, 2025, that's half a year ago. Imagine there was an airstrike on a prison in Iran. And that prison is called Evin Prison. Oh, see, that's what happens when you make your notes on a thing like this. You see, I have a booklet like this, and you see how bad my notes are. Let me show you. And then you can't read your own handwriting, and then you don't prepare yourself well enough. Okay, doesn't matter. Let's continue. Now, basically that Prison Evin attack is an AI kinetic hybrid attack. Sounds so complicated. Okay, basically it's simultaneously a real attack and a synthetic reality. So on June 2023, the IDF sent planes and bombarded the Evin prison. So bombs are falling on the Evin prison. And you know how it is. When you bomb something, maybe there's a fire, maybe there isn't, maybe the bombs fall on the prison, maybe they don't, you don't know. But while bombs were still falling, deep fake videos of a burning prison, that burning prison, were posted all over the internet at the same time. 50 plus fake X profiles were saying, oh my God, I'm next to the prison. Look here, there's a fire, they bombed us, etc. And people in Iran, they were seeing the burning prison like in a movie. And what happened? Multiple international media outlets also picked this up and broadcasted this as though the footage was real. So now you have a deception. You have a deception that people in the country already don't know if data is real or not. They cannot go and connect to the outside world and check. You know, it's not like when something happens here, you go and you do a deep research or you use 5 other models, or, you know, you call somebody and you say, hey man, you're already in that country, is this thing happening? But remember that Iran is essentially cut off from the rest of the world. And why would anybody do that? Why would the Israelis do that? Well, to blow things out of proportions. Because by doing this, they're creating an alternate or synthetic reality where maybe the protesters on the ground are saying, you see, now Israel bombed us, now that thing is on fire, and they are validating the opposition. And the Iranians now are doing the same. They're taking famous Iranian singers, like YouTube celebrities, and they're creating fake, deepfake videos of them singing protest hymns. So then people who are protesting are like, you see, even the famous people are on our side. The fact that sometimes when you watch this video, there are, visible errors like duplicated tattoos and crowds that are sliding as a single unit. In that moment, when people are pissed off, I can tell you they don't notice that. Or they're creating these economic panic videos, like huge lines of people in front of an ATM, or an ATM that got blown up. Or are they really riots now in that city? Was that policeman really shot? And these are two realities in Iran especially due to the fact that the internet is shut down, that people in Iran and as well outside, on all these articles that you see when you read CNN, when you read New York Times, when you read Der Spiegel, you will realize that they're typing something like, these videos cannot be verified right now. It's very difficult to verify these things. Now, Operation Prison Break is so interesting because we know that it was orchestrated. How do we know it? Well, Citizen Lab analyzed it. What did they do? 75% of these posts, look at these viral posts of Evan Prison, which is burning, came from desktops, not from phones. When you guys take a video and it's hot, I mean, you send it from your phone. No, they came from desktops, you know. This was not organic. And the posting times matched Israeli working times perfectly. And funnily enough, 50% of all the accounts came from the same email domain. And what was obvious, that obviously at the end, is the Israeli foreign minister also shared that video from his official account. But what's really cool is, hey, do you know how hard it is to do viral marketing? I mean, we know how hard it is. You can be sure that the entire digital AI execution of Operation Prison Break cost them maybe between $200 to $700. To take Evan Prison, make it burn on a video, well, a couple of cents. Then to set up all these bot accounts, couple of cents. Zack, 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 zack. Do you understand how hard this is to do, like a marketing gig? Well, the IDF showed us how cheap it can be. And why is this for us interesting as business leaders is the same AI that you guys are using today to automate your business can be weaponized against you and your business. We understand that influence operations are now very cheap. I mean, you can build them very cheaply and you can even automate them. So if somebody really, really seriously targets your companies and they want to flood the world with, you know, videos of your company burning or, I don't know, bad things happening in your company or I don't know. I mean, they need a few open source DeepSeek models and one or two open source video models and a couple of $100 and they can create total mayhem. So we can be sure that brands in the future as a whole will be targeted more because what's happening with the prison break operation and what's happening in Iran is also giving us a blueprint of, hey, on paper, it's bloody cheap to attack somebody. Might it be a regime or a government, or might it even be your competitor? Now, Malcolm, you're saying that Iran, the regime will fall. I'm not saying this. I'm saying the regime doesn't sleep because they use AI too, and they use AI maybe better than the citizens. We know that the regime in Iran has a Chinese tech stack, obviously because they can't get the European tech stack and the American tech stack. They're working with a company called Tiandi Technologies. And Tiandi Technologies is supplying them on a 5-year contract with AI-enabled cameras. So you run around in Tehran or other cities, and there's facial recognition, like in London a bit all the time, right? Where they look at your face and they realize who you are, etc. Probably better than in London. Now, how do we know how well this thing works? Well, remember the protests, these women who were violating the hijab rules and taking off their things? And then what they did is they were beating them up, and because they were beating them up, they were dying, and this was in the news, and our global outcry, oh my God. Okay, well, how about we use AI? Because if a woman doesn't wear a hijab as a protest, no problem. AI will pick it up. So these AI-enabled cameras will recognize her, and she will get an SMS. And that SMS says, an AI camera has detected you. Next time you will be arrested. And by the way, not only this, here's a fine for you to pay. That number or that AI tech stack works so well that 1 million SMS warnings for hijab violations were sent out in just 2 months. Hey, Chinese AI technology for repression. I mean, that's some great advertisement for the company, Tiandi Technologies. And if this works in Iran, you can be sure that hundreds of other countries are calling them and saying, oh, these cameras, how do they work? Teach us about them. But it goes further. Now, remember those VPNs. Now, Iran doesn't just block a country or just block people. They actually use really advanced technology. They're using deep packet inspection systems. So they don't just see that Malcolm goes in and wants to surf into whatever, any website, doesn't matter, Financial Times. No, they will analyze each and every single packet sent and say, oh, this is Malcolm who's actually hiding behind something, so let's block him. And these AI systems, they also learn. I used to work in oil and gas. I know I say it in every third episode. And it was for Schlumberger. And Schlumberger is an American-French company, but on paper, it's an American company. Now, at the time already when I was working there, if you wanted to go to Iran, you were not allowed to take your laptop. And you were not even allowed to take your personal phone. The company was telling you that. Because at the time already, they were saying stuff like, hey, when you log yourself in the internet, and I'm serious, like we used to have courses about this. We used to have not only anti-sanction courses or sanction courses, but also where they used to give us these advices. Because they said, the moment you log yourself in the internet in Iran, your device is compromised, they're able to read the storage capacity, they're able to check what you have inside, etc. But before it was difficult because they needed hundreds and thousands of people who were going to read all these messages and try to find out what's happening. But now they have AI. So AI can run across all these systems, all these faces identified by AI. Everything you write as a packet, a deep packet, can be fished out and analyzed by AI. And then if you're lucky, you get an SMS fine. And if you're now thinking, oh, thank God I live in the US, or thank God I live in Austria, or thank God I live in Papua New Guinea, no, our governments, they have this technology too. They're just not using it right now in this way. But remember, when there's mass unemployment here, when people take to the streets, they're going to use the same tactic against us. And therefore, what will you have to do? And companies are already doing this. We know. We forget that we have an AI Act, EU AI Act. We know that companies are using AI for employee monitoring, like productivity scoring, etc. We know that AI is being used also by HR to predict HR violations based on previous ways that employees are working in the company. So all of these automated AI decisions, positive or negative, they're slowly already being implemented in a business environment around you. Okay, Malcolm. Now, what have we heard today? What are you actually trying to tell us here? Okay. Well, a few things. First of all, the way that the Iranian regime is just shutting down the internet can happen to you guys too, 100%. Maybe not the entire country's internet is going to be shut down, but one day Trump is going to wake up and he's going to say, Microsoft, we want to invade Greenland. Let's put pressure on the Europeans. Just switch off Copilot and switch off Microsoft Office for the Europeans. Let's do this for a couple of weeks. I mean, you can imagine that 99% of all the companies will not be able to operate in Europe when this happens. Because our lock-in effects, at least for the AI models, might it be Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever, is so high. But start enabling your employees to work with different models. Start giving them DeepSeek. And if now you say, oh my God, then my data goes to China. No, you can run DeepSeek on the AI Foundry from Microsoft. I know I'm contradicting myself because I'm saying if Microsoft switches this off, but you can use DeepSeek from Microsoft. But at least if they use DeepSeek, they learn how to prompt these models, which are different than other models, And not only this, the startup mindset is that lock-in effect is not only on the AI tech stack of Office and Word, etc., but also on the AI tech stack. Because there is no good LLM in Europe. There's no good LLM company in Europe. And if you say that Mistral is one, no, Mistral is already a US company. We kind of know that, right? They've already moved the R&D over there, and essentially they're going to move also the headquarters over there. So you guys need a startup mindset, a bit like what's happening with the people who are resisting in Iran. And not only this, let's start thinking also about decentralized. Again, Microsoft switches off the cloud because Trump says so. Then you're stuck because you're probably running on one single cloud, the Azure cloud. Now, banks, for example, or very, very large institutions run so-called multi-cloud systems. And they are slowly not anymore so hard to set up. A multi-cloud system is you might use Amazon AWS, you might use Microsoft Azure, and you might use the Alibaba cloud. And the Alibaba cloud is one of the biggest clouds in the world. So by doing this, you're already starting to work decentralized. So again, if an Iran situation happens here in Europe and the US switches off the internet or the clouds, then at least you're going and your Alibaba cloud will work just fine. And also your workers, people working in your company, give them portable open weight models on their phone. It's not hard to install DeepSeek. Malcolm, I don't need it. No, I disagree. Especially in like construction. Imagine you're in construction. People who are in construction, their workers have no internet half of the time. They're like on a mountain somewhere. They want to ask AI. They don't have even like 4G or 2G, whatever. The internet is so slow. And they have to wait until they're back in the office, maybe the next day or the day after that. And they've forgotten 99%. But if you set up local AI on their phones, and DeepSeek are great models that you can set up on their phone, okay, they're a bit slower. But it doesn't matter if the cloud fails, if there's no 5G, you have business continuity. And what's happening in Iran right now, the protests, also have to do with a sort of business continuity. Even though they have no internet and they have no AI, they still must continue protesting. We can learn a lot from these geopolitical events. And now the last one, and then I stop, is we understood today that influence operations are cheap. They're really, really cheap. And not only cheap, they also can be automated. So next time when your competitor is trying to be a really, sour person, they can run very, very cheaply a negative viral campaign against your company. And we see that happening by the Israelis in Iran, we see that happening also by the Iranians in Iran. So again, bringing us back to the point that I was making a bit. We've seen Maduro and the situation that's happening in Venezuela, why I explained that the US tech stack, the army tech stack, AI tech stack is super advanced, making them being able to plan and execute such operations super fast, much, much faster than even 10 years ago. What we see now in Iran is also a turning point. It's a turning point where AI is serving as a resistance tool, like therapy, circumvention, fake news, etc., and as a surveillance weapon from the government, facial recognition, DPI, automated enforcement, etc. Okay? But AI is basically really contributing to an existential threat to the state of Iran. And again, this can happen here in Europe. Maybe not in 10 years, maybe already in 2 or 3, who knows, right? But people who are listening to this podcast, you will be the disruptors because now you know how to use AI. You know how to build an encrypted V2 Ray with DeepSeek. And if you don't know, go and ask DeepSeek. So you guys won't be the ones who will be disrupted, hopefully. You will be the disruptors. So yeah, future topplers of regime. Malcolm?